Good morning and welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. Welcome back. Good morning and welcome to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. It's Friday, and as always, it's Fridays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. Good morning to you, Sandy. How you doing? Yeah,
we're back.
we're both back.
We're both back, yeah.
And let me do this. So hey, Calvin, how you doing, man?
I am doing well. Like you said, it is a welcome back for you.
Well, I have to say, man, congratulations to my fill-in host, Stu. Stu did a magnificent job of hosting the last few days. And all I could think about, Sandy, is I'd better not miss any more days. So he was really great. I'm sure you guys enjoyed him. But, back to the old salt mines. And so we have a special guest in the studio, colleague Don Brown. What's your show called on Saturdays?
This Week in Waukesha.
This Week in Waukesha has a special announcement he wants to make.
Hey, thanks for having me, Earl. I'll be very brief because I know you and Sandy, to borrow from our good friend James Santel of Morning Cannolis, you two have an ambitious but achievable agenda. So I want to be respectful of that. But hey,
that's his verbiage.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
You have to. He's got stacks and stacks of notes. So he's got a lot of content. So, but speaking of content, my show happens before James Santel. It's normally started at 8, but starting next Saturday, not tomorrow, but next Saturday, Small Business Saturday, This Week in Waukesha will move to a 2-hour format. And that inaugural episode will be great because we're celebrating small businesses in Waukesha. We're going to have a few small business owners either appearing in person or calling in to talk about specials they have, as well as all the wonderful things they have year round. And I encourage your listeners to check us out because, Waukesha is another great Wisconsin city. It's very unique. It's the oldest university city here, thanks to our friends at Carroll University. It's Guitar Town, USA. There's so much going on in this vibrant community that a 1-hour show just doesn't do it enough justice. So I'm really grateful to Civic Media and for the opportunity to talk about more issues affecting life here in Waukesha. And these issues that also resonate with the rest of us around the state. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come on and promote that. And also gives an opportunity for Waukesha residents and those who love Waukesha to call in on our number, 844-967-2789. I know Earl's got that memorized. So I encourage your calls. And then tomorrow is a kind of preamble or a good warm-up. We're going to have Chief Daniel Thompson from Waukesha Police Department, his first appearance on the show tomorrow. That starts at 8. But again, starting Small Business Saturday, the 25th, This Week in Waukesha will be a 2-hour show, 7 to 9. And we look forward to seeing everybody there.
Sandy, you know a little bit about Waukesha. You know your way around.
Well, Waukesha is actually lots of the small towns around of Wisconsin are old, date way back. So Waukesha is one of the oldest, and Carroll started, I think, before statehood in 1842.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think most of the listeners who live in some of the smaller communities around the state are living in places that date way back. And it's interesting, the heritage that you can feel when you're in such a small town. It's much different than, you can go around Milwaukee and see the old buildings, but you don't have a sense of oldness like you do when you go down Main Street in Amory or someplace, and you can look over and that building was 1910 and that one was 1895.
In Main Street in Waukesha downtown, there's so much great architecture, very historic, and it's a great little walking tour of Wisconsin just right here in our downtown.
Well, Waukesha is not a small town by any stretch of the imagination.
70,000 people, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like our mayor, Sean Riley, always says is he hates when people refer to Waukesha as another suburb because it's not. It's a very unique university city and so much history. Birthplace of the forward pass in football. I don't know if you guys knew that, but
and the electric guitar, the modern electric guitar.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but the small towns, smaller cities, but they're cities, and Green Bay and Bayfield and all these places that are around the state that we talk to are cities unto themselves. They all revolved around some industries going way back. and their heritage is closely tied to the Wisconsin heritage. So I think the roots of Wisconsin lie really in these smaller cities. That's the place where you can really get a sense of the heritage.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's great that civic media continues to grow because there's so many other great programs sharing this information and this rich history and a lot of the great goings on in these different communities statewide.
It just as you guys are talking about that, and as we are now connected to many other cities in the state. uh I would say that our phone lines are always open at 844-967-2789, 844-967-2789. And Sandy, we certainly would open the phone lines to people who are willing to call in and talk a little bit about their cities, their towns,
Absolutely.
what makes them special.
And what is what's currently ticking in their town that keeps their attention. We talk a lot about national stuff, but there's most of the stuff that's national has local impacts, and working couples, this median family that I like to talk about, resides in all these towns and have the same kind of struggles that we talk about.
So our phone lines are open, 844-967-2789. You can do a start now and tell us a little bit about your town, what you like about it, and the changes that have occurred. Well, we got a lot we're going to talk about, but we certainly can find a few minutes to and encourage you to call and tell us a little bit about the history of your town. Because depending on where you live. Oh, we already got
the sirens going here in downtown, going down Wisconsin Ave.
Lynn from Oconomowoc, and Oconomowoc's not a small town, but. Good morning to you, Lynn. How you doing? Thank you very much.
Milwaukee. And the east side of Milwaukee. And I was a student at the university for a long time and spent many hours in the historic Milwaukee Teacher College buildings. And
what used to be, what is now UWM, huh?
I used to. I took the long route.
Nothing wrong with extra innings.
16-year program. I'm one of those students that after 130 credits now you pay master's prices. But we always walk through Shorewood and Milwaukee's east side. We walk down to the Downer, which is no longer, and to the Oriental Theater. We'd ride our bikes through Milwaukee on Sunday morning when things were quiet and rode down to the 3rd Ward. We were runners, so we ran along Lincoln Memorial Drive and Prospect Avenue. So you're missing the historic nature of Milwaukee. Yeah. Unfortunately, I also worked for the Department of City Development, and I know we lost a lot of landmarks during the redevelopment phase of Milwaukee.
Sandy,
yeah, no, I didn't mean to diminish the nature of that. Yeah, Milwaukee's a wonderful, got wonderful old streets and old buildings, and actually did a much better job of saving old buildings than many other cities, in spite of the fact that I'm not sure we did it purposefully. It might have been the slowness of the economic development in the city, but Milwaukee's remarkable. You travel around the country and you realize that Milwaukee is held on to much more of its old vitality.
And I would do one better and say that Milwaukee, in many ways, is a universe of small towns. When you look at some of those unique neighborhoods and the character and the history, and also too, because I work in nonprofits, I learned recently that Milwaukee's giving, its philanthropy, the foundations and the corporate donors and the individuals, our amount of giving is competitive with the biggest cities in America: New York, Chicago, LA, and that is a huge, I think, a badge of honor for a city our size.
Well, one thing, just to talk about history, though, one of the reasons we have these neighborhoods was the streetcar system, and I can admit to being old enough so that in my youngest years I traveled on the streetcar, and the streetcars what created the commercial corridors in Milwaukee, and it also created the neighborhoods because it was the terminus point at various places that created. And the growth of Milwaukee grew along the streetcar tracks. So, there's great history, but and the history is clear in Milwaukee. I'm just saying that in smaller towns, people are in the history no matter where they live because it's right there.
Well, when especially a city slicker like myself, who hasn't had an opportunity to get around to these smaller towns and places in the state of Wisconsin.
We're going to do that, Earl.
Yeah, you and I have talked about it. We're clearly going to do that. We're going to visit each radio station that we at Civic Media have and do a live show from those places across the state.
That sounds like fun. I'm jealous.
Yeah, and so, but Sandy, so I don't know what, let's say Baraboo. So Baraboo is a place that, what did they have? Paper mills? I mean, what was the
circus?
Well, they had the circus actually. You know, I
know about the circus, but you can't.
Well, and they have, there were paper mills in the vicinity of Baraboo. I'm trying to think there is a munitions plant right there at Baraboo. And I can't tell you what the turn of the last century industry was in Baraboo, but I can assure you that there was.
Right.
And that all of the towns that we talk about and cities in Wisconsin had active industry ongoing in 1910, and that the town's origins date back to that period.
Yeah. Here's a little nugget on Baraboo that's current. There's a coffee house there in downtown. I forget the name, but they have the best coffee, and you can get it either in the beans or ground. And it's called Love Potion number 9. So when you guys go to Baraboo, pick up a couple bags. I'll give you some money of Love Potion number 9. Best coffee.
Keep that one. Keep that under your hat.
Yeah. So best kept secret in Wisconsin.
What are you going to say, man, in closing?
In closing, I just, I want to thank Civic Media again for the opportunity to deliver Waukesha life in a 2-hour platform and to engage more callers and listeners, and so much great things to share. And I encourage everybody, no matter where you are in the state, to get the Civic Media app and tune into WAUK Saturday morning, the 25th, Small Business Saturday from 7 to 9. And also support your local small businesses in your communities. But we invite you to come on and to call in. And again, thank you for this opportunity this morning, Earl and Sandy.
No problem, Don. They couldn't have picked a better guy and a better homer than Don Brown.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll be right back.
Have a great weekend and happy Thanksgiving.
You too. All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. It's Friday. It means Fridays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. And I want to thank Don Brown. And you guys Don's a great guy. He just really is. And he's the perfect guy for the position that he's in. And so I'm really happy for him. Sandy, I have to, we haven't talked about this for a while. Zelensky's number 2 visits D.C. as U.S. warns Ukraine funds running dry.
Yeah.
They're about to pull the plug.
Well, this was the problem with essentially the way we got into this without an understanding, consensus understanding in Washington about what our policy to Ukraine was. It was always an undercurrent, lots of money flowing into Washington from Ukrainian lobbyists and others. And so we developed a stake in Ukraine without having it be a bipartisan agreed upon stake. And then we essentially provided support to Ukraine in a nature that permitted them to put their back up against the wall and get into a war with Russia. And so now we have discord. And this is the worst possible thing for the reliability of the United States as far as it being an ally or being dependable in the world, because we didn't get into it on the right basis. We now have the potential that we might actually leave Ukraine out there to hanging out to dry, or at least act in such a manner that pushes them severely in the direction of needing to do something that's compromising their interest. And if we hadn't backed them, they would have negotiated something and wouldn't have lost hundreds of thousands of people. But now they have. And so, we really are pregnant in this situation, and it really will be damaging to the U.S. reputation internationally for us to pull the plug. So this is the problem with backing into cactuses.
Sandy, before I remember having the conversation with you on these airways, before this even got to the point where Russia invaded Ukraine. And you constantly were saying, what is our role in it? What are we going to do?
What is our real interest?
Right.
Do we have a real strategic, critical interest or not?
Well, it turns out we didn't.
Well, apparently a lot of people in Washington, including legislators, think we don't, because they're talking about pulling out. And you don't pull out of something that's actually critically important to your national security. And so, that's the problem. You have to evaluate things realistically. You can't get swept up in emotional arguments or ideological arguments if they don't reflect real critical interests.
Now, you use the verbiage, Sandy, our natural interests and our national interests. Okay, with this, what is our national interest in Ukraine? Is there such a thing?
Well, there are
After all this time?
There are places in the world where we do have a critical national interest, and it's critically important to us that those places have their independence protected, that they maintain an alliance with the United States. The main argument that people have made about Ukraine is that it's a sovereign nation, okay, and some would describe it as a sovereign democracy. The level of democracy that existed in Ukraine in the last decade is arguable, okay, because it clearly has an oligarchical aspect to the whole environment there in Ukraine, and the extent to which that constitutes then a democracy of the sort we champion is questionable. But the two arguments that are made for it is that it's a sovereign nation and that it's a democratic nation, and we therefore have to protect it. We have not, however, protected nations like that from incursion
other parts of the world.
In other parts of the world. And so we got into this, I think, because it's European, because we got fascinated with the expansion of NATO, because Russophobia is something that we have sort of a reflex reaction towards. And so it all lined up. And so we kind of backed into this, like I said, backing into a cactus based on ideological theories and based on some historic Russophobia.
Sandy, we're here now. And it's real. The Joe Biden administration wants to continue to support, but they can't do it unilaterally.
Well, I mean, the problem is that, as like I said, the fact that we got here then puts us in a different fact situation than when I was discussing this preliminary to the invasion by Russia and the question about whether we should be promoting, for instance, Ukraine into NATO and doing some of the things that probably stimulated this conflict. Now we're there, and Ukraine is there, and can we simply walk and turn our back on this? Well, we can't do that and do anything but lose the trust of all of the rest of the world in terms of watching the United States and how we behave. There is a middle road here. We can continue to provide support, and we can push Ukraine in the direction of coming up with a peaceful solution to the war.
Well, Sandy, that clearly is the way it should be, but the chances of us as a nation with the unrest in Congress doing that seems like a long shot.
Well, we're so dysfunctional in this country that I'm not sure we are capable of having a discussion that relates to end game, because the dysfunction we have in Washington is one of the reasons for it is that the people in the fight don't have end games in mind. The schism in the Republican caucus doesn't have an end game in mind. They're about theater, and they're about making declarations and points, but they're not about accomplishing something. I just saw a video of a Republican senator speaking with frustration, saying, "Tell me one thing I can go back to my constituents and tell them that we, the Republicans, have accomplished. Tell me one thing that we've accomplished."
Yeah, that's kind of saw that, and they couldn't respond.
No, and well, there was no response, but I think it's not because they couldn't. I think under the decorum they couldn't, but there was nothing for them to respond with is the problem. And that's proof to me that there just isn't an end game here. It's all about the fight. And I'm afraid that to some extent, our international affairs is all about the fight.
So when we come back, Sandy, I clearly want to delve deeper into that, because based on what looks like the outcome that's going to wind up in Ukraine, it's and the stain that it's going to leave on
Well, see,
the United States.
I think the reluctance to fund Ukraine is all about leverage, and I think that the Republicans who are resisting it are simply looking to get something in exchange. They're now talking about southern border, Mexican border activity and changes in policy with respect
Sandy,
to the southern border.
They don't equal. They don't.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think everything's on the table for everything, and so I get it, but we can't let that get in the way.
We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. It's Friday. It means Fridays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. And Sandy, I just think that we need to give just a little more pause to what looks like is going to happen in Ukraine and the impact of it. If you look at Iraq, Afghanistan, and what the outcomes of those things were for 16 and 20 years. And people can say we weren't at war in Ukraine, but I think the American people just don't have an appetite for these kinds of things anymore.
Well, I don't know if they don't have an appetite or whether the stridency of the polarized partisanship in Washington is such that if there's a lever, they will pull it, kind of a thing. And so I think the lever here is that Biden has gotten out in front of the Ukraine, and there's been enough of a divide created between Republicans and Democrats on the Ukrainian issue, that the Ukrainian support issue, that strident Republicans now say, he's got to have this Ukrainian, the United States basically has to continue providing aid to Ukraine. But if we put a roadblock in the way, we can get something for it. This is a trading chit. Okay. This is what we used to not allow to happen in our foreign affairs, to allow foreign affairs to become trading chits in politics, because it makes our foreign affairs very unreliable, right? If every one of our international positions is really just a chit that's going to be traded in domestic politics, then we aren't going to be a very reliable partner, a very reliable negotiator, and it will lose us diplomatic capacity. And so that's what's happening right now. And the danger with respect to a sort of a willy-nilly approach to, number one, backing into the Ukrainian situation without a unified position, and now showing a lack of unity on it in such an important environment where there is a major conflict ongoing. And the reason for that conflict, at least the reason for its persisting duration, has been U.S. support of Ukraine. So if we pull the plug on Ukraine abruptly, it's apparent what the outcome of that will be. And so, in order for us to be viewed as a reliable international partner, it's important that we have a constructive approach to this. If it's going to be ultimately pulling in our horns, then it needs to be done constructively. And I think the Biden administration's approach to saying, look, we want some funding. Now, they've asked for $60 billion. What's the right number? I don't know. But enough money to make sure that it stretches out into the future long enough so that Russia will look at it and realize that they are subject to a long duration of time of Ukraine being able to resist them, such that they maybe need to go to the negotiating table. Because what we need to promote here is a negotiated settlement.
So, Sandy, that's not something Ukraine was willing to even accept at any given point in time. Without the financial support from the United States, they certainly don't have any other choice in that matter, do they?
Well, and certainly, there's back channels, and Ukraine probably and the United States probably should have had a constructive conversation to indicate that the level of U.S. support would be finite, okay, that there is a finite commitment here. And that's the difference between a critical issue, a realpolitik position, and something else. If this was a critically important, critical to national security of the United States, our willingness to support it would be infinite. Okay, but I don't think our willingness is infinite. I don't think the Biden administration's willingness is actually infinite, and I don't think Congress's appetite is infinite, which tells me that we made the wrong decision up front about how we constructed the environment that related to Ukraine. And one of the ways that it was constructed was this notion that Ukraine would be invited into NATO, even though we knew that Germany, for instance, would veto that.
Our phone lines are open at 844-967-2789. I'm interested, Sandy, in the thoughts of our listeners, because I remember early on in, this invasion, the news media was showing. They were interviewing Ukrainian people. They were showing, the destruction of Ukraine and Donbass and all of those things, and we could see those things with our eyes. Once they stopped showing all of those things and it became a back burner issue, people who they used to call the show and say, hey, we had to do this. We had to get involved. Remember?
Sure.
Now you can't even get an opinion from many people who believed early on this was the right thing to do because innocent people were being killed. How much of this, Sandy, is the fact that the media and the role it plays? Because the media hasn't shown much of this because people are still being killed. The war is still going on, right?
Well, it's interesting the way media covers war today. Without war correspondents who can talk about military casualties and military targets and the extent to which military targets are involved, we end up with news coverage that only relates to collateral damage issues in warfare. So that in Gaza, in Israel, we only hear about civilian deaths, and in Ukraine, the main headlines we see are again civilian deaths, and the issue really is whether the number of civilian deaths is disproportionate to the level of conflict and the level of strategic military battles that are ongoing. The Geneva Convention recognizes the potential for this a very unfortunate effect of collateral damage, and basically it has to do with the proportionality of the collateral damage to the military targets and the military advantage being pursued. We never hear about that side of it, okay? And so what we get is we get fanned, the flames of our passions are fanned by the news of collateral damage. And, I think we should understand about collateral. War is a terrible thing, and it is going to kill civilians. And the question then becomes more proportionality. And I think that was what fanned the flames of our interest in Ukraine. And now we're not hearing much about it because Ukraine has basically become a battle at a front where there are military casualties and not so many civilians.
Sandy, last thing I want to say on this is the American people, we're so fortunate, right? You always talk about the ocean separating us, and we don't have fear. We don't have to live with what people are living with all over the world. And we're fortunate. We're blessed.
Yeah, we have.
And so we don't have to think about
the biggest
war.
moats ever built to protect our castle were the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, which are basically unpassable. The Pearl Harbor, incidentally, was an attack in the middle of the Pacific. It was thousands of miles away from the American coastline.
So anyway, I just think that it's as we start coming to a point where we know Ukraine is going to be an afterthought until Russia does what it's going to do.
Well, I think the segue, however, about Ukraine is Mitch McConnell. Okay, Mitch McConnell is backing the Biden requests for support for Ukraine. His main argument is that we need to protect democracy and that Ukraine is a sovereign country and a democracy, and it's under attack by Russia and needs to be defended. And my only point about that is that I know another democracy that's under attack, and it's ours, okay? And we aren't being attacked by foreign powers. We're being attacked from within. And the very principles of our democracy are under assault in such a way that we could invidiously lose what we've got without the fanfare of bloodshed, without the fanfare of bombing. It will be self-inflicted wounds. And we need to wake up to it. And Mitch McConnell needs to wake up to it as well, because the party that he plays an instrumental leadership role in is playing a big part in this by passively allowing Donald Trump to champion Viktor Orban and Erdogan and Putin and Duarte. And he has over his time championed every strongman leader in the world. And I think it's because those people represent an image of what it is that he wants the American people to want for America. And he thinks he represents that strong man.
You know, Sandy, when you bring up, where we are, let's go to Scotty from Racine. Hey, good morning to you, Scotty. How you doing? Thank you very much for the call. You say what?
Hey, good morning, and great. Thanks for having me. And I think, when we talk about these issues, we say we're not at war, aren't we? I mean, if we think about Vladimir Putin's agenda, it's war on the West. And if we think about who he is, he's a psychops major, right? I mean, he's definitely the type of person that knows how to wage counterintelligence. Like Russia's military may be huge and also inept in many ways, and they're conducting a war of genocide in Ukraine at the behest of a henchman that's an international crime syndicate more than an actual leader of a country.
Do you think that the American people care?
I think the American people just don't realize that people like Donald Trump are in Putin's pocket, and you better wake up. This is not just an external exchange of gunfire in Ukraine. This is a worldwide conflict between international forces aligned against Western democracies working in coordination. And I'm talking about Iran. I'm talking about North Korea. I'm talking about certainly Russia, who kind of is a head ringleader of that. And then we got China over there. And they, by the way, are kind of in opposition. So part of that, but they're not a part of it either.
So what do you think about Sandy's statement that the real threat to our nation is inside the borders?
He's right. And the real threat to our nation is really fear itself, isn't it? It's the same old story. People being afraid. That's how people like Donald Trump get elected. That's how people like Putin win. They play on fear and division. They divide people. They create two separate camps and exploit all the weakness. And weakness in America has always been racism. It's always used as a wedge to divide people apart. That's what Putin does. That's what they exploit. That's what Donald Trump does. And it's terrible. And we need to wake up, because it is a war. It's just not a hot war with bullets at the moment. But some of these people apparently want it to be. And it's pretty creepy out there.
Scott, I think you've hit a point. I'm not sure that Putin wants to have a military war with the world, but I think that Putin's version of leadership is the kind of leadership that he would like to foster in the rest of the world. Strongman leaders, Viktor Orban, Donald Trump, and these people feed off one another because they actually facilitate one another. They're able to bargain with one another, make deals with one another that prolong their own power structure within their countries, and so it's true that people who are strongmen want other strongmen in power in the other major countries in the world, because it facilitates what they do. And so, to the extent that I think we have an international war, I think that's the war we have. I don't think Russia has either the military power or the appetite to assault countries other than Ukraine, but I think they have the psyop operation in place to try and undermine the democracies and to try and create an environment just like they did in the United States. I mean, I don't know whether Trump couldn't be convicted of being complicit in the dealings that Russia had in the 2016 election, but there is no doubt, based on the Miller report and others, that Russia was actively involved trying to affect the U.S. election. And how are they trying to affect it? They're trying to affect it by destabilizing the democratic institutions and installing strongmen.
Hey, Scotty, I wish I had more time. Thank you very much for the call, man. Really appreciate it. We will return. Got a lot to talk about on the other side. Be right back. All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Friday. It means Fridays with none other than Sandy Williams, my co-host. And Sandy, our phone lines are open again. Sandy, I think that being an American means that, we're the only nation that hasn't really been invaded for the most part, major nation. And people say, well, Pearl Harbor. Well, that wasn't in the homeland.
Right.
So as a nation, we haven't had to face that. Well, then people say, well, 9/11, what was that? But we're talking about militarily. And so we're comfortable. We don't feel as if that can ever happen to us. We don't feel like truly that our democracy can ever unravel because it's never happened before. So,
well, we did have times when it came sort of close.
Yes,
the McCarthy period was a test. We all in school learned about checks and balances, and we were told that our system had checks and balances to make sure that the executive power couldn't become a dictator, couldn't become a monarch. We had checks and balances that solved for excessive democratic power on the part of the Congress, so we wouldn't have a runaway kind of a French Revolution kind of a democracy. We have checks and balances, and so we all got comfort from that. Well, the problem is that the founding fathers, when they set up checks and balances, assumed that people would be operating within norms, within kind of standard norms, and would not be setting out to test the very limit of the checks and balances until the Donald Trump regime, And Donald Trump has set about, and it's been clear from the beginning, he set about testing the limits of the checks and balances. How much can a president do unilaterally without being restricted, And he's taken that to the point where some of it has to be, where the judiciary, which is the ultimate balance, The judiciary is the entity that needs to implement the laws of the United States. Being a country of laws, a nation of laws, is the very fundamental basis for a democracy, that everyone is subject to the law that is enacted by our democratic institutions. And so the problem with our judiciary is it takes time. It's not pretty. It's not efficient. It takes time. It protects the individual rights of the individuals, but I'm not sure that it is capable of protecting the rights of the institutions by that delay in time. We can see it ongoing right now. We've got, Donald Trump being the subject of all kinds of litigation, most of which is going to take years, Most of which we all can kind of cynically understand might take longer than the 2024 election. And so is that balance, is that check working? Well, not very well. So the problem is that our checks and balances, when we really put them to the ultimate test, are going to be frayed, They're going to maybe start coming apart at the seams. They might not function. They might not work. And the fact is that a frontal assault, particularly one that is backed by a significant number of people, all right? Donald Trump has decided to attack the judiciary and their reputation and the notion that they are reliable. He's decided to attack the federal law enforcement agencies, their reputations, and question whether they're reliable. And he's got 30 to 40% of American people along with him questioning the reliability and reputation of the very fundamental pillars of our democracy. Well, that's certainly a level of cynical distrust that can erode the American democracy. It's not going to take 90% of the people. It's going to take a significant cadre of people. I think we are coming right to the edge of having a significant cadre of people who are unwittingly talking about championing the American Constitution, and in the very process of that, they're destroying it.
Sandy, you talked about unwittingly, not knowing in supporting this guy, and that he is not in the least bit concerned about them.
Right.
Solely concerned about himself. And the more you watch this, the more I got to be honest with you. Could not believe that our government could be in the kind of danger it's in with one person. That one person was able to lead. Well, I guess one person is very powerful, depending on what his message
one
is.
person has set a style up that has been embraced by a number of people. So the Freedom Caucus is now filled with a bunch of people who are all about theater, who are all about making government not work, not trying to make it work. They're trying to make it not work. They're all about putting government in disrepute. They're all about draining the government of money, reducing taxes, and reducing all the things that the government might spend money on. This isn't libertarianism. This is a direct assault on the American government, on the American, and it's done in the name of the American way of life. It's being done. It's the ultimate hypocrisy, and it's not being done, I don't think, with malice aforethought by the 40 million Americans who are following them. I think the 40 million people who are excited about this and excited in that direction believe that they are protecting the very Constitution that they're in the process of destroying.
Sandy, the more you look at it, the more I just honestly, the more I look at it, the more frustrated I become, because I see it. It's just right there. And the fight, Sandy, is again one that people have to be able to see through, not just what they get from him.
Right.
Well, but they've got to see another. There's two sides to it.
Yes, and I think the way you get to seeing the problem is to ask what the end game is. You want to destroy the courts. What's the end game? What are you going to replace them with? How are you going to get a judiciary that you trust? Are you going to only get a judiciary that rules in your favor? Because that's not a trustworthy judiciary. What are you going to do about the federal law enforcement agencies? What's your end game?
You really do feel that the nation is in danger?
I do. I think our institutions are in danger. I think that our loss of a vibrant news media, and one that can shine the bright light of news media coverage on these problems, makes it more likely that the problems will exist and will prevail.
We'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Friday. That means Fridays. My co-host, Sandy Williams. Sandy, we always talk about the fact that you and I have been around a little while. And we've seen our nation at different times, different intervals. And I can honestly say I've never seen the nation where it is right now as divided, where the people themselves are an afterthought. And the fact that we can't seem as the people to take back, what really is ours, right? Tom always talks about we the people are the government, but it is ours, and we can't seem. It's almost like we don't have the power, and we don't understand that we have the power. So we talk about voting, and people vote, but things just don't seem to be getting any better.
Well, I am afraid that the vectors of progress are going in the wrong direction. I think that government should be a manifestation of us. Okay, it should be a reflection of our society, and I fear that it actually is becoming that, because our society, I think, has become quite fractured. And I'm not sure it's chicken or egg, whether it's the political process which has fractured our society, or whether it is our society which has fractured the political process. I think there are underlying social issues. I think that that race is an underlying social issue that is even hidden from ourselves. It's a subconscious issue, but I think it is reflected in some of the polarity, some of the fears that we've generated. The urban versus rural ongoing battle seems to be a societal problem that might reflect some of that. But what we've got now is a whole group politically who are motivated to essentially obstruct government. Okay, there was applause in the Freedom Caucus when it was pointed out that the new speaker, Michael Johnson, had essentially accomplished nothing during his period in Congress, that nothing had been passed, and there was applause from them because that was a badge of distinction. Not accomplishing anything is exactly what a whole bunch of people in Congress are interested in accomplishing. Nothing. Okay, blocking the progress of government because government in their mind is the enemy. And they've tried to create in the people's minds a notion that government is the enemy, and that Donald Trump is now trying to do the same thing, telling people, I'm your martyr. I'm your Messiah. I am standing between you and your enemy, which is the government. When they come to get you, I will stand between you and the government, because, he uses himself as an example. The government's coming to get me, and I'm going to stand up to them. And when they come to get you, I'm going to stand up for you as well. And just listen to that. I mean, it's craziness. It's craziness. It's a seditionist. Okay. It's the notion that government is not a manifestation of us. Government is our enemy. And I'm afraid that societally, we've created such a fracture that there are a substantial number of people who feel just that way. And that is the beginning, not of anarchy, but it's the beginning of autocracy.
Let's go to Bill from Oconomowoc. Good morning to you, Bill. You say what?
Say, just on the topic you're talking about, Earl, about how bad things are. Now you got 3 old guys talking, not just 2. I was there in 1967. I remember when I was stopped on 3rd Street and my car was searched. I saw a National Guard in my city.
Right, I
was
remember.
Stopped again on Capitol Drive at the bridge. I also witnessed my president being shot on TV. I also witnessed a president being impeached. I also witnessed, I know it bothered my grandmother so much she thought it was the end of the world when Israel was at war. And I could go on and on with Vietnam and all that. I think, and I'm asking, I'm not telling, I think as we get older, we tend to forget what's behind us, what we've already lived through. And what gets me is these young people, and I mean up to 40 years old, that are trying to tell us they know what's right. Hey, I've been there. I got the T-shirt. I lived through it. I'll never forget all that stuff. And I bet you, Earl, Sandy, I bet you remember it. Have we forgotten what we've lived through? That's my question.
Well,
it's a great question.
As a cohort,
Bill,
we lived through very disturbing things. But the American public, I think that the period in 1964 and the Civil Rights March has come closer to matching, and the disturbance about the war in Vietnam come closer to matching the polarity in the country that we are now experiencing. The riots at the Chicago Convention in 1968,
the worst,
reflected real polarity. That was generational primarily, though. It was people who are our age now, then, okay, who were up in arms about it, and it was the generations older than them who were resistant to it. So we did have a generational split. I'm not sure we had as much. The civil rights marches were much more of an intergenerational social split, and you're right; those were extremely divided times. But I'm not sure that any of the people at that time were interested in bringing government down. It was more about changing government, getting government to do the right things. I'm afraid that now the movement is more directly focused against government, and that's what worries me.
Thank you very much for the call, Bill. Appreciate it. Let's go to Tim from Eau Claire. Hey, good morning to you, Tim. How you doing, sir? You say what?
Good. Well, I think these Trump supporters and all these people, you hear his talk about racism and anti-Semitism and vermin and stuff. a lot of these supporters don't realize that they might be the people that he's talking about. So, don't wish for something because you might get it. I don't think they understand that.
I think you're right. I think a lot of the support of Trump is not recognizing the danger that he poses to them. And I think that's almost always the case of someone who is running for an autocracy. And that is that they want to utilize the mob for their own purposes. But when after they get their power, they turn their back on the masses and they address the social elite and the economic elite as their ticket to continued power. And that's been the coloring book, the strategy for autocracy for 150 years.
I was going to Mark from Sussex. Good morning to you, Mark. You say what?
Well, first of all, thanks for taking my call. But I guess I'd like to ask you guys, what rock have you guys been hiding under? Because when Donald Trump was president, all we heard was the democracy is going to end. He's going to put us in all these wars. He's not my president. So you're saying there's, the Republicans are a threat to our living. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard when we've got China and Russia and all of these other things, other people, terrorists that are attacking us. And you come up with the Republicans are the problem, or it's internal in the United States.
Well, the FBI talks about where the threats are, right?
Well, I think that, we're talking about different kinds of threats. First of all, I don't think China's talking about invading the United States or threatening the United States. I think that's hyperbole. Okay, I don't think Russia's doing it either. I think that the difficulty with China might relate to Taiwan. The difficulty with Russia might relate to Ukraine, and then we have to ask ourselves whether that's in the singular strategic interest of the United States. But what is in the strategic interest of the United States is the bedrock of our Constitution. I have not used the word Republican once in this discussion because I don't believe I don't believe that the Republican Party is at all the problem. I think it's individuals, and I think that the Trump movement itself is a problem. I don't think Donald Trump is per se a Republican. I think he would accuse most Republicans of being rhinos because they might not support him. And I think if there was a survey done of Republicans in which they were really honest with themselves, I'm not sure how many Republicans would favor Donald Trump, and they might favor someone else.
Sandy, I'm interested in Mark's thoughts as a Republican, as a MAGA Republican. What are we missing in who Donald Trump is, and why you think he's the answer? What are we missing?
So first of all, I'm not a Trump fan. I will not be voting for him. I'll vote for him if he's a Republican.
Well, he's going to be the nominee, sir. But go ahead.
Well, then I vote for him because we can't stand another 4 years of the border, the wars, the economy that we're currently in. This you guys always say it's going to be the end of democracy. Well, it's going to be at the end of our economy with more and more years of Biden.
Well, wait, Mark. Let's take this. Let's unbundle this though. What is it that's gone so wrong with the economy? You can point at inflation. What else? And inflation, incidentally, has been stifled down to 3.5. We have now not historically high interest rates. We now have returned to the norm in terms of the long-term average for mortgage rates for 30-year mortgages, where I think maybe 0.3 of a point above the long-term average for what it is. What is it that's so troubling to you about the current economy? Because the jobs are very strong. The stock market's doing very well. What's the problem?
Well, I think just you hit on it right there. You guys are accepting the fact that interest rates are only 1 point above. But what were they 5 years ago?
No. Wait a minute, though, Mike. Let's go through history, though. I mean, if we're going to be economic, if we're going to look at economics, if we're going to look at financial history, the reason interest rates were at 2% was that in 2008, we suffered a financial collapse. We had interest rates that were at the time at historic averages, okay? And we had a financial collapse in which our whole financial system was put at complete risk, okay, at the end of the Bush administration. And ever since that point, we have had what was historically low interest rates, okay? Very historically low interest rates. In fact, the interest rates were so low, they were viewed as a problem for our economy. And the interest was in achieving inflation. We were troubled by the fact we might have deflation.
So listen, we're going to continue this conversation on the other side. You can join us at 844-967-2789. Be right back. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Friday. That means Fridays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. And Sandy, before we go back to the phone lines, as you were pointing out to our last caller, he clearly is, echoing the sentiments that you hear, unfortunately.
Well, no, here, I think this is true, okay? We get used to something in the economy over 5 or 10 years, and we begin to think it's the norm, and we don't recognize that we were living in a period which was totally unprecedented and abnormal, and actually unsustainable, okay? And economists all understood that it was unsustainable. And the question was, when are interest rates going to return? When is inflation start getting into a normal range, okay? And, so inflation went past a normal range for a while due to commodity issues and world issues, as well as potentially some domestic issues. But we've now inflation is now returning to a norm. It's at 3.25%, 3.5%. Most recently, it's moving down below 3. And incidentally, 2 is not an average inflation rate for the time period, okay, since World War II. It's been higher than 2% on average since World War II.
So to corroborate your point, in my soon-to-be 70 years of living, there was only one time where the interest rates were 0%.
Yeah,
only once.
Once.
I mean, when you bring that to the attention of people, you see a different, picture, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I'm going back to the 70s, and when interest rates.
Well, I can go back to the 50s. Okay, I was working in a bank in Summers when I was going to school in 1960. Okay. And, I can tell you what mortgage loans were costing then. They were costing 4.5% to 5%.
In the 60s?
In the earliest, in this 1960s.
Wow.
And during the 60s, they went up to in the neighborhood of 6 and 7%. During the 70s, they got all the way up to 15%.
Right.
Okay. But, what we had from 2008 until today was a totally abnormal period, driven by the fact that we came to the brink of a depression in the recession we experienced in 2008, and we had a general financial collapse and a general distrust across the world of financial instruments. And so, we worried a great deal from 2008 until 2015 or 16 that deflation would take over, and deflation is the worst nightmare.
Let's go to Jack from Merrimack. Good morning to you, Jack. You say what?
I say the following as quotes from the Harvard Business Review. We have a booming labor market. We have exceptionally strong household balance sheets that help keep spending high. And you notice that there is a lot of people are spending money right now. We've got major corporations still going strong. Profitability at record highs,
and investments are at highs too. Business investments, yes.
Fast wage growth, partially due, by the way, to unionization, which had been fought for decades. We have consistently strong sales growth in those corporations. The firms are reluctant to make layoffs. And finally, there's the absence of convincing systemic threats of recession. Now, this is from the Harvard Business Review, not taken out of context. These are quotes. Finally, this is not the cause of inflation. which, as you point out, has continued to drop and is now closer to norms. According to both Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, about 2/3 of inflation simply price gouging by major corporations. Gee, no wonder profitability is at record highs. But it is, of course, to the advantage of the Republicans, at least certainly the MAGA Republicans, but actually all Republicans, because they're going to be blaming the Democratic administration. It's to their advantage to convince people that the economy is terrible. And if they, in fact, are able to force a government shutdown, it will be.
But Doc, Jack, it is true, and Sandy has said it. There's a tremendous segment of our society who is not benefiting by the economy being the way it is now, and those people who can't take advantage of it are really those who say that it's a horrible economy.
Well, except that, no, those aren't the people saying it. The right, I think those are the people who hear it and put some credibility in what's being said. The people who are saying it are basically the Republicans, right? And the Republicans don't represent the median family and sub-median families, although increasingly I think Trump was speaking to rural American median families, and I think that that's something that the Democrats need to wake up to, that Trump was sending a message that was resonating with those people. And I think one of the reasons it was resonating was the fact that they, based on their environment and situation, were not thriving in an economy and could be angry about it. But our economy, if you look at the macro indicators of it, is very strong right now, very strong.
Thank you, Jack, for, as always, for some great information. Let's go to Doc from Milwaukee. Good morning to you, Doc. How you doing? You say what?
Good, brother. First of all, thank you both for a great show. Thank you, Sandy, for all your knowledge. I just want to make a couple of points. Point number one, why is it that when people on the right start a conversation, this is for you, Mark from Sussex, asking you what rock you were living under? Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, Sandy, I'm sure you'll remember this. I believe it was 1960 when Nikita Khrushchev took off his shoe and pounded it on the podium at the United Nations, talking about how Russia was going to overtake the United States and they would not have to fire one bullet.
Well, yeah. Was it at the United Nations or was it at an Iowa State Fair? To be honest with you, I think it was at the Iowa State Fair, but it was an interesting event. That argument that they were going to overtake the United States was kind of a relatively innocent argument about technological advances and technological development. It was done in the context of rocket thrusts and the threat of nuclear missiles, I presume. But Nikita Khrushchev, if you look back at history, was actually a period of softening relations, and it was his leadership of the Soviet Union which ultimately led to a détente process with the United States and created a long period of relatively smooth sailing in a Cold War. Okay, and at least during the Cold War, we had rules of engagement with the Soviet Union, which kept the world relatively safe. I'm afraid that what's happened now is that we've lost moorings with respect to our international affairs. We've been put into the Pax Americana environment, which endangers us to, one, spend an enormous sum of money, and two, become very involved in all kinds of places around the world.
Guys on the line, hang on. We'll come to you when we get back. It's Friday. That means Friday is my co-host, Sandy Williams. We'll be back. So, Sandy, you remember the mamas and the papas?
Mamas and the papas, moo-moos.
Yeah.
Moo-moos.
The thing about the mamas and the papas, where you would have never thought, you just look at them, right? They were just average people, right? Nothing, you look at them and they're just like people you find anywhere, but they made a great career of it. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. You're doing pretty good on all these oldies but goodies.
Stirs up the old juice.
Let's go to Bill. Hey, Bill, what's going on?
Sorry for calling back again. I don't know if I'm overstepping my ability to speak, but by the way, on your selection of music, Earl and Sandy, keep it up. It's spot on. It brings back memories every song. But here's a question I've been dying to ask you guys. Back when Rupert Murdoch bought the Wall Street Journal, I had a fit. And the reason I had a fit, I was with a friend of mine. I said, that is the worst news investors are ever going to hear. And he said, why? I said, look what Rupert Murdoch did to Fox. Do you think he's going to do that to the Wall Street Journal? And bingo, when the minute Biden became president, we went into a horrible recession. And I thought, what are they talking about? We don't even have a recession. They're not even being honest with us. I really believe, and I want your opinion, if Rupert Murdoch's purchase of Wall Street Journal was part of the, quote, spooky recession that we don't have. What do you guys think?
All right, Bill. Thank you very much for the call, Sandy.
Well, I happen to think that while the Wall Street Journal opinion pages are to be disregarded more often than not, I think that the news portion of the Wall Street Journal is extremely good and has remained extremely good. And I think they recognize that business needs the straight skinny. They need news and they want it unfiltered. And to the extent that they get biased news, it'll lead to bad investing. And so I think if you strictly read the news portions of the Wall Street Journal, you'll find that they have very accurately covered the situation and have provided me with most of my information that has led me to understand, number one, that we don't have a recession, and two, that soft landing is pretty likely. But I think their opinion pages are overread and overaccepted by politically, and I think their opinion pages have undoubtedly been affected by Rupert Murdoch. And I think it's those opinion pages that you might be referring to.
All right, let's go to CJ. Good morning to you, CJ. You say what?
Good morning, Earl and Sandy. Thank you for taking my call. As I listen to you, I can't believe, Mark found out the guardrails that Sandy always puts up. Don't believe your lying wallet. Don't believe your lying eyes on the border. Don't believe what's happening to you in real life. We got to go down the road of history, how we got here. Well, Larry Summers, President Obama's. Oh, no, go ahead, Sandy. Go ahead. You're going to talk over me.
No. How we got where?
Warned, just like the Wall Street Journal opinion page, that this is going to cause huge inflation. Inflation has come down, but interest rates are higher than hell. And I tried to sell my parents' house, couldn't do it. People weren't qualified anymore because of the interest rates. So you guys can try to deceive people what they're really feeling in their wallet and their eyes and watching the border. And the world's on fire because this president and his party has caused it.
All right. Thank you very much for the call. Sandy, you want to respond to any of that?
Not really.
Right.
I just think that the facts, you just look at historical facts, stick to the facts. It belies CJ's attempt to try and create this into a partisan issue. I think the facts are what they are. And I think the causative agents of them have been discussed and have been discussed widely, actually, in his Wall Street Journal. And while he refers to the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, I think the news portions of the Wall Street Journal have carried the facts quite accurately.
So he totally disavowed your explanation or your exegesis on why the interest rates are where they are.
Well, he said
that they came from so far.
Well, CJ just said interest rates were higher than hell. Okay, I don't know quite what that number is, but the fact is that they aren't higher than hell on a long-term historic basis. They are high according to the last 13 years, but of course, those last 13 years have included the very lowest interest that have ever been recorded. Okay. And were by far the lowest interest rate period since World War II, a modern history of the American economy. And so, I think that, the attempt is made to blame the Biden administration for a bunch of world situations that have created it. The cost of gasoline is no longer coming up, I understand, because the cost of gasoline is plummeting right now.
Right.
With respect to houses, the interest rate to buy a house has gone up, but it's interesting because the number of home sales is actually rising as well. So it's not slowed down the home sales market anything like what CJ just described, but it has made home purchasing more expensive.
All right, let's go to Tom from LA. Good morning to you, Tom. Thank you.
Good morning, Earl. Welcome back. Sandy, good to hear from you as well. First, we the people ultimately are the government. And the reason why I say that is I'm not talking about the progressive side of the government. I'm not talking about, certain segments of the government. I'm talking about all of us. We, the people, all of us are the government. We need to really realize this and understand that if you want a functioning democracy, we all have got to be involved. And the problem, if you really look at it, I'm just really talking to my conservative friends honestly, and look at the income and disparity. Look at the difference in the income and disparity in the 60s versus the 20s, and now in the 20s again. It is the income and disparity. It is the rise of, I will say it is the rise of corporations being the mighty God rather than we the people being the mighty God, which then of course runs into an authoritarian type person that can come in and say they're going to save everything. Unfortunately, people don't even realize there's three branches of government, I'm sure. They don't even realize who the vice president of the United States is, I'm sure. And the thing is, that's a really, really sad state of affairs in our country. And the thing is, we have got to take back the government. We have got to get money out of politics. But most importantly, we have got, on all my conservative friends that are voting against their best interest, look at a very simple fact. The income in disparity between the uber, morbidly rich, wealthy, and the average middle-class person. It tells the whole story. It goes.
Well, I think the thing to focus on is that median family, which should be what we describe as the middle class family. But it's interesting when you look at articles that talk about the middle class of America, they talk about families that earn approximately $120,000 a year, 100 to north of 100,000 to 140,000. That range is middle class, and it turns out that that's way above the median income. And so that it's only a small fraction of the American families that live in that category. So that's the shrinking middle class. That's the problem we face in America. And that's what we need to address. And if I were a business person, a business leader in America, I'd be very worried about the shrinking middle class, because ultimately the American economy and the ability of the American government to function is premised on a large, vibrant middle class.
Let's go to Gary from Sussex. Good morning to you, Gary. You say what?
Well, I'm middle class, and I end up losing. I'm down at least $200,000 in on my 401k. But that's not what I'm calling about. I'm calling about.
Is that because of Joe Biden?
I was doing really well.
No, I'm just asking you. Can you say this?
Under Clinton? No, I was doing really well under Clinton. Matter of fact, I made more money under Clinton than I did any other time. And it's not all about me and my money. I'm just telling. Sandy mentioned before that, the stock market's up. No, the stock market's down. I'm still $200,000 behind what I was.
Well, it depends on how you're invested. The stock market this year has been relatively static.
Well, January.
Well, and the stock market was going to be that it's been booming for almost 10 years or longer.
Well, we haven't even, we went into an adjustment in NASDAQ. An adjustment means down 10% or more. We've had very few periods of adjustment, even, not much less serious decline. So, but middle class, Gary, how do you know you're in the middle class? You sound like you've got substantial. You might not be in the middle class. Maybe you're above the middle class.
No. I trust me. I'm middle class.
Well, when you're talking about $200,000 losing in the stock market, David, I mean, Gary, I think that puts you squarely above.
Well, but anyway, you're going to make a point, Gary. Go ahead.
The reason I called, and I enjoy the fact that you allow CJ on the air. Mike and and Dom, they won't even allow him on the air. You guys do it.
We don't want to talk about CJ, man. Just go ahead and talk about something else.
I appreciate the fact that you allow him on.
We don't want to talk about CJ, man. So go ahead. Let's talk about what you called for.
Okay, let me finish. So TikTok, okay? I watched some of these TikTok views that were on, and these people say, I used to love America, but now after listening to Obama, I don't like America anymore, and I think that we're terrible. And
Obama,
basically, excuse me, Bin Laden. I'm sorry.
Wait. What are you talking about? Wait.
He's talking about what conservatives are talking about today.
Oh.
And on conservative news outlets is that American students got some information about Osama bin Laden. They read it, and they said that they support Osama bin Laden in his way of thinking. That's the conservative narrative of today, and that's what he's preaching about.
Oh.
Go ahead, Gary.
It was on Civic News, radio yesterday.
Yeah, but
Todd was talking about it.
Yeah,
other people were talking. The ladies were talking about it yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's not just conservative. No, it's how can people believe this? One day love America and the next day hate America because of what Bin Laden says that
I don't even know why we're even having a conversation about Bin Laden.
Well, or something that's said on TikTok.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about
Come on.
we're talking about potentially a very, very small segment of people, 3, 4 people. What I mean, I don't know, but I mean, we talk about in generalities. We want to paint pictures of people, but with generalities. This student said this, so now we're going to paint all students with that.
That's what's happening.
And we've got people expressing all kinds of crazy opinions about all kinds of things. We have white Aryan nationalists saying things. I don't think we should try to paint a large group of people with that paint either.
I'm saying TikTok is dangerous. It's owned by the Chinese, and they're just loving what's going on.
So Facebook is not dangerous?
Well, and Instagram would like to be TikTok. I mean, I'm not sure that you can blame TikTok on the owners. TikTok is an idea. It's a bulletin board for videos, and people take advantage of it. I'm not sure it's manipulated at all, actually. I'm not sure if it was manipulated. I think the investigations of it would quickly uncover that.
I think that the point Sandy's making is, Gary, there's so many other issues and things of importance to talk about, that the fact that this thing is now a hot button issue is one that, I'm not so interested in. Thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to the last few minutes of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us that same number. My co-host Sandy Williams is along with me. Let's go to David from Mech One. Good morning to you, David. You say what?
Good morning, gentlemen. Really quickly, Sandy, I want you, when you get a chance sometime this weekend, take a look at the BLS number, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They came up with a number that was so ridiculous that other people are now finally catching on as to reason why the inflation number was where it was at this past month. The BLS reported a 34% decrease in health insurance costs. And they based that on the insurance profitability, which was exponentially they were making a fortune during the pandemic because of all the mandates with getting vaccinations and everything else. So the CPI, I guarantee you, is flawed because when they're using 34% decrease in insurance, they're not using actual people's what actually people are paying for their insurance. I mean, I don't understand. Whoever did that should have been fired.
So, David, are you saying that the economy is not doing as well?
Well, what he's saying is that the most recently reported CPI, cost of living adjustment, is understated because in the market basket of things considered in that, one of them is health costs and health insurance. I can't speak to that. There might be a technical error in it. I'm not sure what percentage of the basket is comprised of that, so I'm not clear in my mind how big an error it would introduce into the overall number. But I'm sure that the number is still in the 3% rank. It's not above 4% as the result of that error, and so it might be an adjustment of a couple of tenths of a percent in it. But that doesn't change my conclusion about the direction of inflation right now. And I'm sure the Federal Reserve Board will be looking carefully at those numbers.
Well, I would say this again. When you have an error of that significance, it's more than a few tenths because the insurance is like the single biggest driver of the economy as far as money being spent.
So, David,
the health costs are. I just don't know. I don't think we need to speculate. I think at the market basket, we can go and look it up because it tells you what the percentage allocations of various segments costs are in the market basket for that factor. And so it's a fact. We don't need to argue about a fact. We can find out what the answer is. But be that as it may, I don't think this was politically driven. Is there a belief that this was administration driven?
No, I don't know who's calculating the numbers, but again, whoever did that, they should be fired for putting out such a flawed number.
Yeah.
All right, David. You know, Sandy. After it's all said and done, as we move into the 2024 election, which is right around the corner, as unpredictable an election time I think that there's been in a long time, or maybe it's not so unpredictable, Sandy. If you really kind of look at things outside of the polls. And
I think elections have become increasingly unpredictable. And I think 2016 was a remarkable fact associated with that. Maybe that was a watershed point where people realized that polls were becoming increasingly unreliable. Probably has a lot to do with cell phones and access to people, random samples of people for polling.
Let me ask you, if you look at the outcomes of so many recent elections and you just see where Republicans are, really starting to lose in a lot of different areas. And then you just use some common sense and you say, but we're looking at, and I get it that Joe Biden is 82 years old, but to still somehow believe that this is Trump's race to win. And it's just hard for me to accept that.
Well, I will say this. I do think that this past week has been good for Joe Biden. I think that the summit conference with Xi, quite frankly, was a win. I think that the policies that were discussed there were positive. I think that the process of having Xi come to America signifies an interest in China and smoothing things out with the United States. I think we might be reciprocating that view. We might find a way to smooth out, for instance, the Taiwanese tensions, which would be a very good thing, and to get back to a trade relationship that is stabilized. We have $750 billion a year of trade with China, and I think that that's reason enough to figure out a way to smooth this thing out because we are interdependent with one another. We're totally entwined.
And I'm sorry, man. That was one of the things I wanted to talk about today, but we went down a different path. The fact that there are people who still want to see the Chinese economy fail in our country. And
well, they are. I'll tell you who they aren't. They aren't the U.S. financial community because as soon as China's economy began to sneeze, we began to catch a cold. And that's sort of what the United States has done to the world, but now China can do it to the world. No, we don't want. China is our biggest growth market. Okay. We want China to continue to grow, at least corporate America does, because that's where we increase our sales.
So you come to a point after it's all said and done, Sandy, where, um, we have to get over it. China, and I think what occurred with Joe Biden in San Francisco with Xi is can't be seen other than a positive. They can now call one another over the phone. And instead of hearing what somebody else said, they've agreed that you and I can sit down and have a dialogue. That has to be a win. I don't care how.
Well, they want to increase travel. I think they want to get back to a much more normalized situation, something more like the relationship with China in 2014, rather than the more hard-lined relationship that developed beginning with the Trump administration in 2016.
Right, we got to get out of here. Thank you, Sandy, as always. Thank you, Calvin. It's good to be back. Thank everybody who made the show going again. Thank Stu for filling in. I'll be back on Monday. You've been tuned into the Earl Ingram Show. See you later.